The topic I have chosen to discuss for my final presentation is African American discrimination. I feel that this is something from our past that is starting to be brought back into light in our Some of the issues that we are starting to see again are police harassment and profiling. This shows such a lack of respect for both parties involved, but more for the one that's discriminated against. Also, pay inequality. This is something like harassment and profiling that has also been around for a long period of time, but is finally back during the 1950s and 1960s. There was the Civil Rights Movement. This was a way to show the public what was happening and a way to stand up for themselves and their rights. Now we're seeing protests and marches similar to the ones during the Civil Rights Movement, and they're taking place all over the United States. Some recent examples that you may have heard of are in Ferguson. The protests where a black teen was shot and killed by a white police officer. Also the murder of Trayvon Martin. Protests were held all over the country. These efforts to stand up for their rights were met with many challenges. Most people, meaning whites, were resistant to the change. They were not used to anything different, therefore they were closed off to it. Also, people were not aware of the issues that were going on and some of the issues that African Americans had to face. Much like today, it didn't affect their neighborhood, so they didn't know. Also, depending on your background, you might not be familiar with these issues. The best way to classify this is people in Many benefits also come with these changes. For example, in the workplace, there was an increase in adaptability, meaning that there were a large variety of solutions for an individual problem. Also, what ties into this is a variety of viewpoints, adding more ideas into the pool. When it comes to the social aspect and harassment from police, you can see by the graph that it shows black males are at a higher probability of being killed by a police officer versus In regards to people living at the poverty line, the graph will show 27.2 African Americans live in poverty, whereas only 9.7 of whites live in poverty. That's a 17.5% difference. Income inequality is a little bit more complicated. Looking at the graph, it doesn't look like much of a difference when you look at the dollar amount, and it really isn't. However, the point here is to notice that there is a difference at all. There are a few different ways to combat these issues and come up with a different strategy to help combat them. Visiting the locations. Go see these communities and see how the people live and get feedback from them. Go visit the schools that these children go to and attend and notice that the quality of teacher is far below the acceptable range. Create relationships with community leaders and members. Talk to some of the leaders in the community and community members and residents and see how they feel and get their feedback on how to improve issues. In regards to the workplace, look into things like training classes and teach the top executives how to deal with these issues in a There are many ways to implement these changes, but there are a few examples. Government officials in power could visit these places to see firsthand what it's like to live in these conditions and what these people do on a day-to-day basis. This will give them the opportunity to make connections with the people that actually live in the communities. Also, give teachers incentives to want to work in these communities so they can also have the same level of education as everybody else throughout the country. Also, have community members be active on planning and funding boards. The benefits of putting these plans in action are many, but putting these in place could help greatly. It would help people feel part of the solution and would give them the opportunity to help. It would also give the community members a voice so they feel heard and not like they just nod another number.